Hello and a good day. Welcome to another episode of Market Watch. Today I have with me Mr. Praveer Samarasinghe, who is the Group CEO of Overseas Realty PLC. A good day, Mr. Samarasinghe. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, Mr. Samarasinghe, so it's a bit of a hot topic, and I think very timely to have you as well, because everybody's talking about a property bubble or the property market, and I think there are new players who want to come into the market as individuals and companies. So, on that light, Mr. Samarasinghe, what is the market overview in your perspective of the residential, the office space, the overall property market, the demand-supply side? What do you think, Mr. Samarasinghe?
If you take the different asset classes in this category of property, if I take office for example, we believe there will be a continuous growth with the gradual prosperity that we are experiencing and the economic development. There will be continuous demand for quality office space. If you take currently, we have about 1 million square feet of A-grade office space in Sri Lanka, and about another 2 million square feet of B-grade space in Colombo, that is also in the central business district and the secondary business district. And if you look at the occupancy levels, more than 95% is occupied. Yeah. So the vacant spaces are very limited. Yeah. So with the gradual growth in business, there is more and more demand for space for IT and IT-enabled services, yeah, startup businesses, local businesses, multinational businesses that come in, and quality space is required. We see there is a supply pipeline as well. There's another 1 million square feet of A-grade space being developed by 3 leading developers currently. Yeah. So that is good for the future. Then on the other hand, if you take retailing as another classification or another class of assets, here again, if you look at it, we are predominantly a high street retailing environment that we have got. And we have not had any large shopping malls developing in Sri Lanka for the last, 20 or 25 years. So there has been, with us becoming nearly a mid-income country, with per capita incomes nearing $4,000 per capita, there's increasing demand for more organized retail spaces. So there again, I think currently must be having a stock about 1 million square feet, which was built a good 20 years back, and now we are lucky there are about 5 good developments in the pipeline, yeah, under construction as well, and over the next 3 to 4 years you'll be having another 1.5 million square feet of good quality shopping malls coming into Colombo. So that's positive as well. And I think with the growing income levels as well as tourism increasing in Colombo and Sri Lanka, yeah, it's very, very important to have more avenues for shopping, entertainment, and F&B offerings. Then if you look at the other area of residential, here again we have an acute shortage of residential housing in Sri Lanka. It's in different tiers of the market. If I look at the high-end market, the more luxury market as well, with income levels increasing, with more and more openness for foreigners and our Sri Lankan diaspora to look at the market, there is growing demand for quality residential spaces. And everyone is now desiring to own a longer term asset, wherever possible invest in long-term assets, wherever possible have multiple assets if possible. So in that high end as well, there's continuous demand for good quality residential spaces. And more importantly, I think a real shortage that we are finding is in the mid-level housing, yeah, affordable mid-level housing as well as the affordable housing. Here there is a huge vacuum, yes, and a need for people, and I'm so sad that the affordability has become an issue for people to acquire houses even in that affordability level. Yeah. So we believe overall there is a large supply, large demand for housing, and the supply pipeline is still insufficient to cater to that demand.
Mr. Samarasinghe, going back on to in terms of office spaces, would we see more developments happening outside of the Colombo city limits? Because I think we are clogging up the city limits. So will that be a trend that we'll be seeing in the future, in your opinion?
most of the office demand will be in the central business district
Yeah.
and the secondary business district. And when I say the secondary business district, also it will be corridors like Colombo 2,
Yeah.
Union Place, Gaul Road, Duplication Road.
Okay.
Those will be the main hubs of for office space demand. While saying that, you will find a gradual shift because of the cost factors of office space coming up in the peripheral areas of Colombo itself.
Yeah.
That is a gradual, and that will be the natural thing where people who cannot pay high rentals in the prime areas will like to have space in
Good.
more affordable areas. And particularly if you take one of the largest growing sectors, or the demand is coming a lot for office spaces from the IT and IT-enabled services.
Okay.
Now for them, the address does not matter too much.
Yes.
It's more the facilities, its ability to expand,
Yeah.
scale up their operations.
Yeah.
So you will find them going more into the peripheral areas. And one of their biggest cost factors for them to compete with international markets is the cost of office space. So
Yeah.
they cannot pay more than $1.50 per square foot,
Yeah.
as they are competing with Chennai or Philippines and
Yeah.
other parts of the world. You know.
Yeah. And also, Ms. Amritkar, with the whole urbanization happening, and we are reaching that 4,000 per capita income. So, and with that, I think the requirement for a vertical living spaces will be growing. But again, like you said, the price point is still unaffordable. So in your opinion, in the industry, do you see the industry having an appetite to go for such affordable or mid-tier properties coming up?
Yes. See, the margins in one of the biggest challenges, if I take the affordable sector, is the margins for the developers. Because the demand for that affordable housing is from 1 million rupees to 5 million rupees per unit.
Okay.
So that's the large section of the demand.
Yeah.
And it was very encouraging in the last government budget as well, when they announced the government to partner with the private sector and build up to 100,000 houses at a price range of 5 million rupees, and another 250,000 households at a price range of 1 million rupees over the next 3 to 4 year period to cater to some of this demand that is taking place. So for developers to take up projects of that nature is very, very difficult because the margins are extremely low.
Yeah.
So it will have to be a partnership with the state and the developers, where the government allocates the land on a free basis.
Okay.
And the government also organized through the National Housing Development Authority or the State Mortgage and Investment Authority certain financing packages
Right.
to enable these people at the lower end of the housing market to be able to own a house for themselves.
Right.
So that is a huge segment where we have to find solutions to make available housing for that sector,
Okay.
including, I think, another area is the shanties.
Yeah.
There is so many shanties and people living in, I would say, temporary housing, as well as in very poor conditions of housing in Colombo.
Yeah.
So solutions have to be found to resettle them in better accommodation and make sure those accommodation are maintained as well,
Yeah.
so that with the living standards of the Colombo and Sri Lanka improving, that has to take place.
Right.
And very correctly you mentioned the mid-population, the mid-income population, young professionals, they should be able to afford a house as well. And that is a huge section with urbanization, where more and more people are coming into Colombo and the greater areas of Colombo. It's very, very important. Vertical living, basically it has come to stay,
Yeah.
and it will grow. And if you look at Sri Lanka or Colombo compared to some of our other neighbors, you take Karachi or Indian cities, or you take Philippines, Thailand cities in Thailand,
Yeah.
everywhere in the city centers are vertical living.
Yeah.
You will not find detached housing, because it's too expensive. To buy in Colombo, in a good address, to buy a 10 perch block of land, it will cost you 100 million rupees,
Plus.
then it will cost you another 40 million rupees to
Yeah.
put up a house, so it will cost you 140 million rupees.
Yeah.
While you can get an apartment for 30 million, 40 million rupees.
Yeah.
So it has come to that level
Yeah.
of we'll have to work with vertical living, and it has come to stay, and that is the way forward.
Ms. Amritkar, on the same note, land prices have been going quite rapidly in the Western Province. I mean, in your opinion, is this particularly sustainable, this price appreciation within in the Western Province, this increase?
Yes, land prices since the end of the war in 2008 and 9
Yeah.
have been gradually increasing. Obviously, initially it was a correction because, as you know, in 2007 we had a bit of certain financial institutions got into difficulty,
Yeah.
and those financial institutions were also in the property market,
Yeah.
and there was a decline in prices at that time.
Yeah.
So subsequently, that correction of the market prices,
Okay.
plus the prosperity and the peace that was brought in after the war ended in 2009, gave rise to the increase in property prices.
Right.
And with more and more confidence in the country, more and more investment opportunities taking place in the country, you have found the prices have been gradually increasing.
Right.
It's not only in the Colombo. If you take the percentage increase in land prices,
Yeah.
the peripheral areas of Colombo has increased more than Colombo.
Okay.
And then other prime blocks like beachfront
Beach-
properties,
yeah.
tourism-related properties,
Yeah.
has also increased much more than Colombo.
Yeah.
So this price increase, we believe, is sustainable, and it will continue to increase because it's a matter of demand and supply.
Yeah.
Our land block is a fixed land block, so your supply is fixed. Of course, you might find the odd reclaiming of the sea and additional land blocks coming,
Yeah.
but the land parcel we have is fixed.
Right.
Demand is continuously growing with more and more urbanization and more people wanting better living and coming into Colombo for their occupational economic needs. There is requirements for land,
Right.
not only for housing but as well as commercial purposes, development of businesses. So the land price on that scenario where there is a continuous demand, if you
Mhm.
look at Sri Lanka for the next 20 years, there will be a continuous growth in the economy.
Mhm.
And we believe land prices will continuously increase. So what's important, I think, for the state as well, who owns a large block of land,
Yeah.
is to manage the land parcels that they release to the marketplace and the prices which they release to the marketplace. The prices being demanded by the UDA and government bodies now when they release land is very, very high.
Yeah.
So that's also fueling the land prices.
Right.
But it also helps to maintain the land prices at a sustainable level. So we believe there won't be any form of issue or a collapse, if you may want to think about it, on land prices, and it will continuously grow with the demand side growing in the economy.
Right. So there. So in your view, there is the demand side is still continuously growing on that end. That's why the prices seem to be reacting towards it. Yeah.
We believe the demand side will grow, and we believe Sri Lanka is in a good pitch with whatever is happening in our neighborhood,
Right.
with whatever forces that are happening in Asia, where China's game in the world economic development, China's one belt, one road policy, and we are there to benefit out of it. A large economy, India is also there on our neighborhood. So with all those dynamics, we believe Sri Lanka will have a very prosperous future, and as a result, there will be continuous demand for property, like in any other city which we have found in the world, for good property in Colombo and also the other suburbs.
Thank you, Mr. And also, Mr. Samar Singh, looking on the more funding side of things, the bank exposures, there's a big, the ha-ho about the bank exposures being very high and growing rapidly on a year-on-year basis since 2013 to the property sector. But it's claimed that it's mostly to the developers rather than the end users. What's your view on that? I mean, is it right to make that statement, or?
No, I think that statement is wrong. It's definitely loans to the construction and property sectors, including housing, has grown more than the growth of loans to the private sector. I think growth of loans to the private sector may have averaged about 20%, while to construction and the property sector, it has increased to about 22-25%. But that's not surprising when the construction and the property sector grows at double the rate of the GDP. Economy grows at 5%, while on a sustainable basis, this particular sector of construction and property has been growing at 10%. So if that sector is growing more than the economy, naturally you will find borrowings also in that sector growing more than the average borrowing rates. But that again is on this aspect of where the money in the construction and property sector has gone, the lending to, majority of lending has gone to households. About 55 to 60% of the lending by banks in this particular category is for house owners. Lending to developers is less as 5%.
Okay.
Lending to developers is less as 5%. It's extremely insignificant because most of the developers in property for residential purposes basically use their own equity or they use pre-sales. What they borrow is short-term working capital for bridging finance,
Okay.
which gets wiped off in 2 years or 1 year or 3 years after the project.
Okay.
So the long-term borrowing component is actually for the house owners.
Right.
And I said property developers for residential have borrowed about 5% based on Fitch findings,
Yeah.
and the residential owners have borrowed about 55%, and the balance are borrowed by contractors and other developers for other asset classes, whether it's hotels or offices or whatever it is. So developers have borrowed extremely little amount of loan, but it's mainly the house owners.
Right.
And it's healthy, I must say,
Yeah.
that is healthy.
Yeah.
Because I believe there is much more opportunity for house owners to borrow
Yeah.
and acquire housing.
Right.
Problem is it has become a bit unaffordable for them
Yeah.
with high interest rates in Sri Lanka to have access, and some to have access to
Yes.
credit as well.
Yeah.
Because if you look at our mortgage market, it's totally insignificant. Our mortgage market to our GDP is about, I think, 3%.
Yeah.
In other countries, it will be 10 times or 5 times that amount, you know. So it's still our mortgage market has a lot of potential to grow.
Mr. Samarasinghe, on a closing note with time restriction, is there sufficient regulation to protect the industry from unscrupulous players in the market? Is it well protected, do you feel? Is there any policies in place for that?
See, policies and regulations can be, I believe, introduced at different stages. At the moment, if it's for a developer, to make sure that the buildings, before a person develops a building, he has to get permission from the local authority or the UDA to make sure that the building conforms to certain standards. And thereafter, after the building is completed, there again the local authority or the UDA has to give a certificate of conformity that this has conformed to all the regulation.
Okay.
So that's the principal regulation for the developer. Then when it comes to residential, there is also the Condominium Management Authority.
Yes.
Through their regulations, as well as there's a law called the Apartment Ownership Law, which regulates to certify buildings that has been finally developed to be able for the owners to get ownerships
Yeah.
or condominium titles. So those are the two basic regulatory authorities there are through their regulations to manage the regulations for the owners. And on the other hand, I believe the owners or the future buyers of property as well should do their own due diligence to safeguard themselves, whether there is proper title to the project or whether the developer is a reputed party. They also have to do some degree of due diligence without just going and spending money. So I think there is a responsibility on the government or through the Condominium Management Authority and the developers, the associations of developers, to educate the end users as well to make prudent decisions in their investment in housing. There has been regulations introduced in certain other countries, more advanced countries, where it has gone, where the dynamics are different, you know. Now, if I take Singapore, for example, to get a building permit for a developer, they also look at the track record of the developer.
Yeah.
So if they have a track record of developments in the last so many years, then they get permission.
Yeah.
And for new entrants, it becomes very, very difficult. Of course, that then crowds out certain people in getting into the industry. In a country like Singapore, they also have a compulsory system of licensing agents, because you can find agents, brokers, manipulating markets, creating speculative environments. So you find certain regulations in those advanced countries to even regulate that.
Right.
So we must know from Sri Lanka's point at what stage we need to introduce certain regulations, or which stage we should introduce more policies to manage the situation. But at the moment, I believe if the building regulations are good, whatever the local authority is adopting, and there is a system of ensuring that they are complied with. And if certain developers do not comply with it, I think there should be punishment for them, and severe punishment, because we have heard of some developments where the owners eventually cannot get deeds because the regulatory authorities do not finally give them the certificate of conformity. So that is a very sad state of affairs, you know.
Right, Mr. Amit, thank you so much. I think that's very informative, and I think what we can see from this is there is continuous growth for the industry, and it isn't as cloudy as we've been expecting it to be, but you know, there's a lot more momentum within the industry and a lot more space for it to grow, especially talking about the mid-tier level for the residential as well as the you know, the office space, etc. So we'll see a lot more growth. Mr. Somerset, so much for joining us. It was lovely having you today. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for another episode of Market Watch. And I wish you all a very good day, and bye-bye.